The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today for how to bridge the gap between marketing and sales. We appreciate you all making the time today, especially given the situation that we know you're all coping with. We hope you'll gather some helpful tips today. And just to let you know, we also have a webinar specifically focused on pivoting your marketing and communications in light of COVID-19 that's scheduled for next week. So if you're interested in more information on that, we hope you'll join us for next week's presentation. My name is Melissa Caravella. I'll be today's moderator. I'm Vice President of Client Services at Creating Results. Just a few housekeeping items as we get started. All lines have been muted, but you can submit questions throughout the presentation in your GoToWebinar control panel in the questions panel, and we'll do our best to answer as many of the questions as we can at the end of the presentation. Our speakers today are Katie Beaver, Account Director at Creating Results, and Jessica Rule, Sales Specialist and Project Director at Creating Results. Katie works with our senior living and 55+ clients to provide strategic marketing insights and helps ensure all marketing tactics are optimized for maximum impact. As part of our sales services department, Jess works closely with our client sales teams to align their sales and marketing initiatives in order to exceed their sales goals. And today we're going to be talking about how you can better align your sales and marketing processes. And we know for a lot of the clients that we work with, sales and marketing are often used interchangeably. Today, when we talk about marketing, what we're really talking about is the outward-facing ads that we use to generate interest and generate leads for your community. And when we talk about sales, we're really talking about the process through which the sales team interacts with leads in order to help them through the sales journey. What we find is that oftentimes there are opportunities to better align those two disciplines in order to optimize the sales journey. And so today we're going to be talking about the realities and challenges that we all face as marketers, whether you're in senior living or 55+. 4 tips for aligning your sales and marketing. We'll show a couple of case studies from clients that we have who are doing this and bridging the gap very well, and then have some time at the end for Q&A. So with that, I will turn it over to Jess.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. And so as outlined in our agenda, the first thing we're going to talk about is, before we getting into actually the bridging that gap between marketing and sales, some of the realities and challenges that we face within our industries. So according to a recent AARP study, 95% of seniors 65 and older and better would prefer to remain in their own homes. And as marketers, even when there is a need for assistance, we're still competing with the desire to stay at home and use home-based services. This is also a challenge in sales because our prospects are not seeing the value in coming to the community over staying in their own home. And we need to work together in marketing and sales to really show the value of a 55+ or a senior living community to effectively communicate in all that we do and present to our prospects. For those of you in home-based services, this is a benefit as people are looking to stay in their homes and bring that home health care in their homes when needed. So as we look at some of the marketing challenges, we think about the increased competition and the differentiating yourself can be difficult. And if you and your competitors have a similar product and a similar price point, then the way to stand out is to optimize how consumers experience your brand. According to Forrester, focusing on consumer experience is how you're going to sustain that competitive advantage. And this is just a random sampling of ads that circulating, and as you can see, whether no matter what the message is, they generally will look the same. And so our job as marketers and in the sales is to identify the differentiators. And you're not just competing against other providers in your industry. Technology is also making it easier to remain at home, and the prospects of tomorrow do not need to move. We just have to want to want them to. And this means that it's the totality of the consumer's experience across the various touch points that infers the brand loyalty. So if we move to the next slide. So as you address your relevancy for this audience, you'll also want to think about how you can help your community stand out. And we'd encourage you to think about it in this Venn diagram that we're showing here. And a lot of times what we show and what we talk about is we many times focus on the why you and the why not the other guy, meaning you're really good at talking about what it is that you do well and talking about what your competitors are not doing. But let's take a look at the third circle here of what's important to your buyer. And that's what your buyers value. So it's really important to look at all three of these elements as you're developing your brand. And that intersection is your brand. And so how you go about doing that is to conduct significant research. And the research is going to tell you, based on your surveys of your stakeholders and your prospects and anybody that you have that would be of value to providing that information to you, and really to get what that brand messaging should be. And so research definitely goes, there's a lot of research that goes into doing that. And once you have done that research, it's developing an integrated marketing plan and applying that to all the different channels. You may not be using all of these in your marketing, but if you do have an agency or corporate marketing team, it's likely that you do. And what you will notice that it's not just about the traditional channels of print, direct mail, or even direct marketing, but it's also the experience in and around the community, which brings forth the sales team and making sure that what your prospects are experiencing in the market and the outward facing marketing messages is also the same experience that they have when they walk through your doors. So as we take a look at not just the challenges that we're facing and how to differentiate your community, we also want to take a look at the lead timeline and some statistics around our industries around all the different numbers that we're facing in the statistics. So the first one that you're seeing on the screen is relative to a cost per lead. And this is not just for independent living, but it does go broad into all industries. But you're looking at a range between $250 and $1,000 of cost per lead. And that range varies because of the fact that dependent on where your community is in the life cycle of that community. So at the lesser end, $250 to more established communities in terms of those that have been in the industry, they're maintaining their occupancy, versus 1,000 where you might be in a blue sky or a brand new community process. And then as we move to, next we're going to be focusing on the sales process and how many touch points and how long the timeline is for that. So independent living is generally 10 to 25 touch points, meaning emails, phone calls, in-person appointments, any interaction with your potential from an inquiry to an actual move-in. And then as we look at the timeline, we're looking at anywhere between 18 and 36 months for that inquiry to move-in timeline. Then as we shift over to more of a need-based sale, thinking of those of you in assisted living or personal care, the number of touch points does reduce slightly, but we're still looking at about 7 to 15 touch points. And then in terms of timeline, we're looking at 6 to 12 months for 55 plus. And if we keep on putting up the bubbles here, 3 to 18 months for that assisted living, and then 15 to 20 touch points for 55 plus. So as you can see, between touch points and the time frame, you're looking at a lot of opportunities for us to communicate with our leads, both in marketing and in sales, to making sure that that bridge between the two is succinct enough. And then as we look at trying to shorten that sales cycle, if you want to be on the lesser end, having that bridge between marketing and sales is important. So now we're going to move into the tools and the tips, and I'm going to hand it over to Katie to start us off.
Thanks, Jess. So before I go over our tips that we've promised, I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about a theme that you'll probably notice throughout the next few slides. I know we're all busy, especially right now, but it's extremely important that we remember to take off the blindfolds as you work with sales and marketing together. Really collaborate and embrace that in eliminate any silos. You want to ask questions between the two teams and really just make sure everyone's informed and aware of what's in the market. So marketing, share that with sales, don't hold it back. And then sales, on the other hand, report back into marketing and really keep them updated. If there's a lake view or an end unit that's selling low, share that. So then the marketing can leverage that information and really use that as an urgency message. So just want to keep that in mind as we go through the next tips to really just make sure that you take those blindfolds off and really work together. So our first tip is to use a visual roadmap. This is a tool that will help you make sure your sales and marketing messages are complementary and consistent. And this piece is really designed to be collaborative and working with sales and marketing to gather all the materials, put them in one place so you can see visually what really is going on. And if you work on both sides, if you do marketing and sales, this is a great place to get everything populated and really make sure and check to make sure everything is consistent and cohesive and it all makes sense. So I'll walk you through the visual that we have up here on the slide today. This is just a small example that we want to share with you to help you kind of go back and create one on your own. But on the far left, we just identified, what this was for. This is a lead gen and it's organic search. So we went together and we gathered all the details that fell under that category. And then we started with, in order, okay, what's going to happen first? So for this instance, the first thing that a prospect might see is a display ad. We included a visual as well. It just always helps to have that visual. So if it's mentioned within the sales process, the sales associate will be able to identify that right away. We also included the call to action. That's really important to understand the process. So this call to action was download a brochure. So we can see if someone took that action, they would actually receive that brochure. So we included a visual of that as well. We also pointed out some of the key things in the brochure. So if a salesperson was to have discussion and a prospect mentioned the brochure, they would be able to easily identify what was in that brochure, and they wouldn't be trying to give them the same brochure they've already seen. Also, on the thank you page that they received from this ad, there was also request a tour. So it's important to know that when this person calls, they'll be wanting to take a tour, so they can go straight to scheduling that tour and get that person in the door. The next section in the middle is any next steps that sales or marketing would take. Some of these, might be in order if you can get them in order, but some of them happen candidly based on the prospect's interactions. So the top, the salesperson has gathered all the emails, all of the tactics that they would be sending. And then the bottom one is from marketing. So this instance, there was some Facebook, there was also e-newsletters or whatever else marketing might be using as well. We would add it there. And then the last section, which I hope everyone is doing for digital leads, we included visuals for the drip campaign that we included for this client. And a drip campaign is just basically an automated email based on time or actions. And it also helps to have it here so the sales team can see that they're going to get another email in a week or 2 weeks. And there's a quick visual so they can see what the call to action is, and they understand that process that the prospect is going through. So as you can see, this is a great tool that really helps inform each other. So from a sales standpoint, they can see what marketing is doing, and marketing, you can see what sales is doing. But more importantly, it makes sure that everyone is aligned. The messaging is consistent and clear, and you're really nurturing those leads, and it really helps the sales and marketing team complement each other. So that's our first tip, is to use a visual roadmap.
Okay, now moving on to tip number 2, which is keeping materials handy. And it also works in conjunction with the visual roadmap that Katie had reviewed. And it really helps the sales team to be ready for their calls and for when inquiries are coming in, providing them with all of the materials. Collateral is a typical one that we generally give to our sales teams as marketers to have that handy for when prospects come in. But for them to also have access to print ads, direct mail, any digital proofs, whether online or printed out, anything that's in the market. Because as we had talked about earlier, in terms of the integrated marketing wheel, that the messaging that is out in the market needs to be the same and needs to be aware of everything that is happening in the markets, so that our sales teams can work to, making sure that that communication is the same. And there's a potential gap here that if we don't know what's in the market as a sales team, and the marketing team isn't sharing that information and not able to bridge that gap, then there's a gap and a potential for there being a miscommunication, as well as some potential gaps in terms of the follow-up that might be happening. Because, for example, if an email is going out or direct mail is going out and we're not aware as a sales team for that information, then we're not going to be able to communicate or be confident in our sales process as those inquiries are coming in. Okay.
Tip number 3 is timely response. So in a world where things move quickly, prospects expect it more than ever to get a timely response. We're seeing a lot of sales team really embrace this. A great example is recently we were doing a secret shop for one of our clients, and I went online and filled out a form requesting more information. And within 5 minutes, a salesperson was calling me. And normally by that point, maybe I had started to look through another competitor, but because they captured my attention with that personal touch, while I was still in the moment looking and searching, it really brought me back to them. And it really did make an impact on that process. And on the flip side, we've seen some instances where there's no follow-up or it takes too long, and by then someone else, a competitor, is jumping in there and they've captured that person's attention and it's too late. So to help with this, we've outlined a few follow-up recommendations for you. So the first one, if you have an in-person interaction, just make sure you follow up based on your agreed upon time frame. This could be short if it's need-based, or it could be a little longer if not, if it was maybe for something that they didn't need right away. But make sure you follow up based on what you had promised, and really instill that trust. Next, if you had a phone call, if there was a voicemail left, you want to make sure you follow up within 24 hours. We know weekends happen, but the best you can as quickly as possible to follow up on those voicemails. Don't let it go longer than a day. And then if you have a phone call and maybe you sent some additional information, make sure you follow up within 3 days of that information being sent. And just make sure they have any questions or go over that information with them, just to make sure that they know that you're thinking about them. And then lastly, for web inquiries, there should always be a thank you or a drip campaign immediately. All brands are doing this, so prospects expect it. But in addition to those digital follow-ups, we want to make sure that there's a personal touch within 24 hours. This goes back to my example. I was a digital lead for them, and they called me right away, and it really did make an impact. Some of our clients are worried that web inquiries may not be as qualified, but we found that they really are. And the great thing is the cost per lead is much less for web inquiries. On average, according to Inquirer, you'll probably need about 17 web inquiries to convert to one sale, whereas for a print you'll probably need about 27 inquiries to convert one sale, and even higher for a direct mail piece, you might need 47 inquiries to convert to that same one sale. So the web inquiries really are important, and that personal touch within 24 hours really helps.
Okay, now we're shifting over to tip number 4. And we're going to talk a little bit about inquiry management. So as we have an integrated marketing plan and there's a lot of initiatives in the market, it's easy to lose track of what's out there. So being sure to inform both marketing and sales and aligning yourselves to make sure you have the right tracking mechanisms in place. As Katie had informed us, there's a lot of landing pages and web inquiries that are being transmitted. Most recently, digital leads have become more prevalent. And so when you have the systems in place, once a form is completed, the marketing and sales teams both informed when they receive that, as you're seeing in the left-hand part of your screen here, a form submission. And that allows not just from a marketing team in terms of tracking and being able to know how many leads are attributed to what sources. So in this instance, you're looking at a Google pay-per-click ad. As the months go on and as we're tracking these things from a marketing side, we're able to know whether or not something is working or not. And then on the sales side, as you're receiving these, you're able to see who the recipient was and their information, whatever information that we're gathering from an email and phone number. And then also what source it came from. So again, Google pay-per-click ad, and we're able to see what the call to action was, meaning what information did they receive, and able to utilize that in your follow-up as in the response that Katie had gone through in the previous tips. And so there's a lot of tracking mechanisms out there in terms of not just web inquiries and landing pages, but also call tracking. And again, call tracking, not just helping the marketers to know what's working and what's not working, but for sales, generally speaking, there is a whisper message at the beginning of a call, which lets you know how and where the call is coming to you. And if these calls are being tracked, it's likely that the calls are being recorded as well. And both marketing and sales can use these recordings in a variety of ways. One, listening to hear if the messaging or the ad placement is evoking a particular response, positively or negatively. And it's also an opportunity to determine how the sales team is responding. How and if they're answering the phone, what information they have gathered or not, and did they present a next step, like a tour, an event RSVP, and more. And call tracking sometimes seems like a simple tool for some, but there are times when we encounter clients who aren't using it to their advantage. And it really is an effective tool for both marketing and sales. And lastly, when we talk about inquiry management, the biggest question, the biggest thing that helps both sides is having a CRM or a customer relations database or management database. So, and there's a variety of them out there. If you're not using one, we would highly recommend doing some research around what is the best fit for your community. And then as we shift, we're with a name like Creating Results. Obviously, we take numbers and reporting very seriously because we're looking to create those results for our clients. And so with the information that we gather through our own tracking and analytics and coupling that with what's been entered into the database or the CRM by the sales team, it gives us a complete picture into the integrated marketing plan and where the leads and inquiries are coming from. And this marriage between marketing and sales helps everyone to be more effective, more efficient over time, and making sure that your marketing dollars are being spent in the places where we are getting the best return on our investment, and ultimately helping the community's bottom line.
All right, so finally, our last tip. I think this is maybe the best but easiest advice or tip we can give you. But really, to truly bridge the gap between marketing and sales, the key is communication. Schedule meetings, have weekly stand-ups. Really, that's the time to understand occupancy, respond to ads, understand reasons people are declining, talk about what's being promoted and upcoming events, plan for those events, schedule monthly meetings to formulate a plan and really discuss the competitor insights and really understand each other's challenges from both sides. And then lastly, do quarterly ROI meetings. These are typically when the marketing team will share the results from the previous quarter, taking all the information that the sales has reported, and use those results to work together to put together some recommendations for going forward. Typically, we find that both sales and marketing teams want to hear from each other. Sales wants to know what marketing is doing, and marketing wants insights from sales. So to start to bridge that gap, communication is needed to align on the end goal, and it's key to leverage each other's insights to move forward.
Okay. So now we're going to share with you a couple of case studies. And first one we're going to start with is Clark Retirement Community. And the situation here was that they were their Blue Sky project, and they needed to meet the 70% pre-sales goal for their Blue Sky project. And so the strategy that we started with, and as we go back to the beginning of this webinar, talked about really diving in and understanding who Clark Retirement Community was and is, and doing that research and finding out what, not just what they could do and why they could do it against their competitors, but what their what their prospects really valued. And then we applied that to an integrated marketing plan. And as the integrated marketing plan started to work and started to generate leads, then we implemented the sales training and coaching. And the goals for what we needed to achieve in both the marketing and sales was 36 sales in 12 to 18 months, and really improving their sales conversion rate because of the timeline that was set. So by implementing the sales philosophy and the integrated marketing plan, the team there was able to achieve great results. They were able to and we looked at this, we were able to look at this because they were using a database, a CRM, and being able to track this along the way, not just from an inquiry standpoint, but also the activities of the sales team and making sure that we had a watch as to whether or not they were achieving that. And during the time that we were working with them and their sales team on increasing their activity and their conversion rate, as you can see with the statistics on the screen, they were able to improve immensely in terms of activities. Their tours to deposit rate increased from 9 to 19% in 6 months, and the industry average is somewhere between 18 and 20. So we were looking into getting into that that range, and we did. And then finally, they were able to double the average number of monthly deposits from 1.5 to 3. And ultimately, through all of these efforts and being able to increase their activity and their conversion rates, we're able to meet their 70% deposit goal.
And a second case study that we want to share with you guys is one of our clients, Phoebe. And for this client, in early stages of working with them, we did an exercise of journey mapping. And if you're not familiar with what journey mapping is, it's basically a visual representation of the buying experience from the prospect's perspective. This piece is really important because often we look at things from our organizational point of view, and we miss all those steps that might happen that we're not involved in. So really, this represents the whole experience across all touch points, and it's a great way to just to take a step back. So when we went through this process with Phoebe, we were able to identify, on the next slide, that during the process, the high points during the journey were during events. So we worked with Phoebe to shift their mindset and leverage these events even more, and just take a look at their event strategy, included some lead gen and conversion events, and really help them set expectations with the attendees, help them with using the event as a step in the sales process, and really work on that discovery and the follow-up process. And once we implemented the revised event strategy, immediately we started to see some results. And by bridging that gap between marketing and sales and having them work together on these events, Phoebe was able to increase their conversion rate and shorten that sales cycle, which everyone gets excited to hear about. So, you know, with all the tactics and all the help they were supposed to guidance, their team worked really hard. They were able to maintain a 3% conversion rate from attendance to appointment and to sales in the first 30 days following that event, which is great. They've been working really hard, and we've seen some great results from this team. So to show you how the events became a turning point, we pulled a few examples. So the first example we have here, this is a couple. They received an invite and they had RSVP'd. So this is a new inquiry from the event planning. The salesperson did some pre-sale, pre-calling before the event, and then they came, they toured. There was some additional conversations, but within 3 months, this inquiry moved in, which is great. And, you know, this is, you know, keep in mind that's unique, but we saw that that event that we invited them really helped to really shorten down that time frame. The next one, our next example, so this was actually a referral. And so they came in, they took a tour, you know, weren't sure, they discussed it with adult children, they decided to bring their adult children back and tour with them. They still weren't sure, but then they attended one of our events and they had a great time, and that really convinced them to deposit. So from July to September, they were a depositor. And then this, the last example, this was also a referral. And then the sales counselor reached out. There were messages left. So I think there's a lag time. They received an invite, and from that invite, they actually went on a waitlist deposit. And, you know, obviously once they are on a waitlist, the team continued to nurture that lead, and then they ended up moving in September. So again, that event was a real big turning point. Obviously, I have to mention it with the state of everything that's going on. You know, this journey mapping helped us identify at the time the events were where we wanted to focus. I'm not saying that like today that might be the case, but just wanted to point that out. So all of this, our overall lift over a little less than a year, working with sales and marketing and helping to bridge that gap with an integrated marketing plan. There was their sales conversion rate went from an average of 2 to 3% to 7% across all 4 of their communities. They also exceeded their census goals, which is awesome. And they with such a strong event strategy, they had 265 attendees, and with the team being so busy with the events, they also were able to complete over 12,000 activities, which is average was the 35 activities per day. So this team really worked hard to make this happen, and we're really excited to share the results from it. So with that, I think we're ready for questions.
Yes, thank you to Jess and Katie for all the information. So I just want to remind everyone that you can submit questions in the GoToWebinar control panel. There is a question panel there, so please feel free to submit some questions for the team to answer. And we do have a couple of questions that I can share with the team. So the first question is, we don't track anything. What is the best way to start? So Jess, I don't know if you want to answer that question or start, or maybe you guys could trade off.
Sure, I can start. So yes, it's definitely a good practice to track what's in your marketing plans and marketing initiatives, and it really is dependent on what you do have out in the market. And you can do that in a variety of ways, in terms of if you have print ads or direct mail, using unique tracking URLs, meaning if you're, for your website, and then if you see a slash at the end and a unique URL, that would be able to be tracked in the back end as far as how many visitors use that particular URL. And the same goes for, as I mentioned before, in terms of call tracking. So setting up unique phone numbers for each of your various initiatives. So those would probably be the simplest ways, but there's a lot of ways to go about it. Katie, anything else you would add to that?
No, I think, you're on the right path of wanting to track things to make sure you're making, you're looking at things holistically and going back to the communication piece. That helps really with that communication if you're able to track those things.
Okay, we have another question, and this participant says that they liked what we showed for the visual roadmap. How long does it take to set up a workflow like that?
So I can take that question. So I think that the thing to keep in mind here is this is just from campaign delivery to actually create the campaign. We see about 6 to 8 weeks, but just keep in mind that there might be information needed prior, some discovery or some research done before to inform the build of a campaign. So about 6 to 8 weeks once you've done that discovery.
Okay. Another question just came in. It says, we run some digital marketing, but I don't find that those leads respond. Do you have any recommendations for that?
Sure, I will take that one. Thank you. Great question. I would say, certainly a lot of communities that we communicate with and work with on a regular basis. And as Katie had mentioned in the presentation, web inquiries are sort of a new venture for folks. And so the best way that we have found in terms of getting digital leads to respond is obviously one in the timeliness of your response, and because they are important and they are raising their hand to inquire with your community, but also utilizing the information that you have received and sending a personalized message. And we work with our teams a lot and provide email templates as far as how best to respond when, whether it be a new lead coming in and they've received an e-brochure, or even some cooler and colder leads that may have been in your database for quite some time that you need to try to re-engage. So, there's the whole point and the big picture idea is that making sure that your response is relevant to where they are in the purchase funnel, and making sure it's directed to what they're looking for. And really, expressing what's in it for them. What do you want them to do, and how do you get them to respond?
Good advice. And then we just have one more question, so please do feel free if you have another question. This question is from someone who does both marketing and sales, and the biggest barrier is that I don't feel like I have time for either to be successful. Do you have any advice?
It's a great question. Certainly none of us has a lot of time in our day, so I can certainly appreciate that. From my perspective, and please, Katie, chime in as well. Certainly dedicating, understanding and putting out a plan, putting together a plan of how you are going to be successful. And if that requires you needing to go to your leadership team and trying to get some additional resources in order for you to be successful, and certainly if you're looking for outside marketing and sales help, creating results. But certainly if you're looking to, I would definitely start with a plan of how you're going to be successful and reaching out to helping with any additional resources that you might need.
Yeah, and I think just to add, like we talked about before, and taking a look at the strategy and overall some of these tools, setting time to create these tools will help you to take a step back and look at them holistically, sales and marketing, so you feel like you're dedicating to both, might help as well.
And I think what I would say too, just if I can add something as the moderator, one of the things that we find is that oftentimes there are non-revenue generating activities that are in people's way. So I think maybe taking a look at, is there time in your day that is, are there obstacles that are standing in your way of doing the things that are really expected of you in order to achieve your goals? And so if you're spending time on things like helping with IT, helping with move-ins, helping residents, or things that are not necessarily within the purview of marketing or sales, identifying those things and seeing how you can remove them from your way might be one way to free up some time within your day.
It's a great point, Melissa.
So with that, we will just give you a reminder for our next webinar, which will be on Tuesday the 24th at 2 p.m. We'll really focus on pivoting your marketing and communications in response to COVID-19. And so you can register at bit.ly/COVID-19-webinar. And we will send a recap and recording of this presentation to everyone who participated, and in there will be a link, in the email follow-up will be a link to register for this webinar as well. So we appreciate and thank you all for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.